Chapter 12, One Fierce Beast. The piano continued on, now in time with the weeping cries of Charlotte. Townsfolk began to get up and withdraw from the center arena. Some left the scene altogether. "This is much more than I bargained for," Kenny heard one farmer cry out. "Maybe this wasn't such a good idea," he heard another say. I don't need to see this," stammered a third. And as the handful of spectators headed up the aisles towards the exit, the enormous fireball erupted from the cave, instantly incinerating the tattered cupboards and billowing a cloud of hazy smoke out into the amphitheater. The thick, murky smog blanketed the attendees, who could now barely see one another, let alone anything else. The fleeing audience members froze with fright, not sure whether to run blindly off into the smoke or to stay with the masses. Then a cold, deep, reptilian voice thundered over the gathering. The sound seemed to be coming from everywhere. "Well, well, well, what a reception this is!" Nobody made a peep, as all were trying to see any sign of the beast in the dense fog. A flapping noise began, and a warm, gusty wind blew the smoke away, revealing the large dragon behind the audience, next to the king's box seats, blocking any escape from the hilltop. Waving his enormous leathery wings, he smiled a jaggedy, toothy smile. "It looks like the whole town is here. Now this is what I call a smorgasbord," he roared. Graham inhaled deeply and blew a stream of fire straight up into the sky, causing glowing ash to rain down onto the amphitheater like fiery snow. Then he leaped up on top of the king's tower and peered inside. "Arr! Let's start with a royal appetizer," he cackled. "Back off! Go away! Shoo!" the king yelled as he grabbed his two sons and hid behind the jester. "Dragon!" George's voice cut across the audience and snapped the beast's gaze from the king. "Your fight lies with me, ruffian!" "Indeed it does," Graham replied, and sprang from the tower, causing it to topple into pieces. He hovered over the crowd for a bit, his expansive beating wings sending trash, ash, and pennants swirling up into the air. The large drake then dropped down into the center aisle. This sent the audience screaming and running for their lives. The king clawed his way out of his wrecked tower. "My word, this is one fierce beast." "What do you think, boys?" he said. "Whoa," they replied in unison. "Devil, prepare for your imminent extermination," George yelled as he charged up the aisle toward Graham. "Little knight, I will eat you alive and use your enchanted weapon as my toothpick. Then I will dine upon this sweet maiden for dessert." At this, Graham lunged over George, landed square in the center of the battlefield, and ramped about, thrashing his wings mildly. See? The smoke billowed and rolled about in very dramatic fashion. It wisped and whirled around Kenny's mom as she continued playing away on the piano. "We'll have to flee, or he'll pick us off one by one," Kenny yelled. "There's nowhere to run. We're fish in a barrel," another responded. Frozen in his front row seat, old Pop's possum fainted right on the spot. The young lad next to him waved his wooden sword and squealed, "Go, dragon!" "Back off, you foul beast," Charlotte yelled. Still bound to the tree, the feisty gal kicked at the dragon while George approached the arena slowly, pitchfork in hand like a lance. The knight's eyes remained fixed on Graham, no matter where the dragon moved. George announced, "It's no use. This is your final hour." "We'll see about that," replied Graham. He lashed his tail about and whipped the pitchfork right out of George's hand. It flew up in the air, plunging into the trunk of one of the oaks bordering the cave. Graham bellowed out a malicious laugh as he glimpsed the pitchfork lodged in the tree. With Graham's attention diverted for the moment, George ran behind him and leaped upon his scaly bat. He drew his sword and yelled, "Devil, your end is nigh." At that, the dragon bucked like a wild horse, high into the air. Losing his grip, George dropped his sword, and it plunged into the top of the piano, creating a loud, dismal, flat note. Kenny saw his mom pose for a moment, and then continued playing more frenetically than ever. The king held on. The knight held on for dear life as the beast vaulted about the battlefield in an effort to shake him off. The audience members shrieked and hollered as they ran to and fro around the skirmish. However, some were mesmerized by the action playing out in front of them, that they edged in closer to better view the gritty battle, oblivious of the danger. At last, Graham landed atop his cave just over the entrance. Flexing his back muscles like a cat, he sent a ripple down his spine, loosening George's grasp. The dragon took full advantage of this opportunity and bucked again, this time sending the knight flying off his back. George was sent arching over the battlefield, crashing into another tree. Branches snapped and cracked under the weight of the armor as the beaten warrior was swallowed up by the thick foliage. Once more, Graham laughed in a low, cold snicker. "You are finished, toy soldier. Now watch, all of you." He turned around towards the audience. "As I dine upon your delectable fair damsel." Most everyone in the crowd was silent, save for a few weak sobs. Kenny was wringing his hands and holding his breath. "It's almost over," he whispered to himself. "Come on, George." Charlotte began screaming at the top of her lungs as the cackling dragon toward her. His back was now to the knight. George seized this moment and dropped down from the tree, pitchfork in hand, and pinned the drake's tail firmly into the ground. Kenny let out his breath. "Back for more, are you? Enjoy your funeral, Pyre," Graham thundered. He inhaled deeply and exhaled in an effort to engulf the knight in a fiery ball of flames, but all that came out was a puff of smoke. He inhaled once again, but this time he gasped and he coughed out only a ring of smoke. The crowd watched, completely stunned. There was George, holding the knotted tail in both hands. He untied Charlotte, pulled his sword from the piano, and announced, "This dragon has been defeated." The audience cheered and applauded in a deafening roar. The knight looked over at Kenny, and the boy smiled. But the cheering of the crowd turned into loud ranting as they clamored, "Off with his head! Off with his head!" Kenny looked at George for some kind of sign, but the knight had positioned himself next to Graham's head with his sword blade on the drake's blue, scaly neck. He gazed out toward the king. The crowd fell silent and turned in unison to look for the final command from their ruler. The king stood in front of the rubble that was once his tower and eyed the dragon as he thoughtfully stroked his beard. Kenny watched one of his sons whisper something into the ruler's ear. The king turned to his boy and said, "What? I don't think so." At this, the audience began murmuring among themselves. Kenny noticed that the second son was now whispering into his father's ear. The king turned to both of his sons and